Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a tale about a homophobic dungeon master that doesn't much care for a player's gay character. Some stories about the strange happenings that can take place at friendly local game stores, and much more. But before we get into those, Simba would like to bless all of you with a Super Simba close-up. There we go. Now I think we're ready to get into some D&D cringe. Homophobic Dungeon Master Converting My Character by Reddit user James Wildland. I'm fairly new to Dungeons & Dragons, and went to a local gaming store to meet up with people to play with. After some mingling and socializing, there was a group that was welcoming new players, and I joined their Discord to do a Session 0 for their campaign. My character is a human warrior, a simple character that would be a good starter. His backstory, which I naturally sent to the DM, included that he was a gay aristocrat that wanted to shed off the high society life and take up a life of adventure, and roughing it with odd jobs, bounties, whatever he could find. Seemed to me like a nice motivation to get together with a ragtag team of adventurers to go on an epic quest. But I also mentioned his sexuality wasn't really relevant, and I was more interested in adventure and combat. I just made him gay because I can relate to him more. The Dungeon Master agreed, and said that his backstory can also help with potential aristocratic connections, if the group needed it. I didn't think of that when I made the character, so I was excited for the potential my character could add to the sessions. The first sessions went great. We did some quests that led us through a few small towns. The first red flags that I didn't notice at the time was that the Dungeon Master had barmaids at the tavern that would flirt with my character, and I would turn them down, focusing on getting to know my party members more. The encounters were seemingly harmless, but my character was the only one of the four of us that the Dungeon Master decided to receive the attention from the women. Fast forwarding to the big city. This is where things got really uncomfortable. We had a job from a nobleman who was being blackmailed by a brothel. The nobleman's information was needed to progress the main story, and he would give it to us in addition to gold if we could get rid of the blackmail. So we go to the brothel where we speak with the head mistress. She tells us that she needs the income from the blackmail because she can't afford protection fees from a local gang. So we as a group decided to take out the gang leader for her so she will give us the blackmail. After we defeat the gang leader and free the brothel mistress from her protection fees, we try to get the blackmail from her, but the Dungeon Master decided that the mistress is adding a new condition. She wanted to spend the night with my character. The other players laughed and thought it was some silly twist that I was dealt. But I wasn't interested in my gay character being coerced into sex with the mistress. I wasn't interested in romantic or sexual side quests in general, but the Dungeon Master threw it my way anyway. I have my character turn her down and roll a persuasion check to get her to just honor the original agreement, and I succeeded. The Dungeon Master says, "Yeah, that works," but his tone of voice sounded like he didn't like my character doing that. The mistress gives us the blackmail, and we return to the nobleman. We give him his blackmail and assure him that the mistress won't trouble him anymore. But before giving us the information we need, the nobleman invites us to dinner in celebration of the service we gave him. At dinner, the conversation brings up my character's aristocratic upbringing, and the nobleman decides that he wants to marry off his daughter to my character, because his family will benefit from the family's connections, and his united house will provide us with more resources for our quest. At this point, I'm getting irritated. This is the second time in the session that my character was getting pressured into getting intimately involved with a woman. I turn down the nobleman, and he gets angry that I dishonored his house for the refusal. The Dungeon Master is strongly hinting that I have to do it in order to keep on good terms with the noble house. The other players offer to marry the daughter instead, but the Dungeon Master insists that it has to be my character, since the nobleman won't tolerate the refusal. I insist that I'm not marrying her, and the nobleman kicks us out of his house and refuses to pay us for retrieving the blackmail or give us the information we needed to continue the story. That's when the session ends, and the Dungeon Master is visibly irritated at my decisions, saying that he would now have to do a lot of rewriting and shuffling around in order for the next session to work. I ask the DM, "You do remember that my character is gay, right?" To which he dismissed it with, "There aren't any gay bars in the story." Which I thought was weird, and not what I was asking. We sorta laugh it off and call it a day. In the Discord, I asked the Dungeon Master, why was my character being forced to get with women constantly? He told me that my character didn't need to be gay in a fantasy situation, and he was trying to correct it, expecting me to just retcon my character's sexuality through various women flirting, hoping that I'd just go with it. I tell him that I'm not changing my character's sexuality just because he doesn't like it for his story, and that's when he told me that I didn't need to come back to the sessions, because he wasn't adding, quote, "some gay orgy" for my character to get into. That really upset me, since I emphasized that I only wanted to adventure and fight monsters. My character's sexuality wasn't crucial to the story, sure, but it was important that it stayed as it was for me. I never went back. Wow, what a dickhead. It sounds to me like the Dungeon Master didn't even like the concept of OP's character being gay. I mean, it's not like OP was actively trying to, quote, go to a gay bar, or, quote, have a gay orgy, like the DM attested to at the end there. It's almost like the Dungeon Master was trying to perform some sort of conversion therapy to OP through D&D or something, since I assume OP is gay, as he said he made his character gay so he could relate to him more. It is a shame too, as OP was originally excited that his character could have some impact on the story of the game, since his character had that background. But like many say, no D&D is better than bad D&D, and it sounds like OP stuck to that saying and didn't go back. Hopefully, he can find a new game with a better Dungeon Master soon. Let's move on. Dungeon Master deletes campaign because we couldn't solve a puzzle. By Reddit user, Mighty Possum King. I can't sleep, so here we go again. A few years ago, I joined a campaign set in a homebrew setting. It was a classic city ridden with crime, complex politics, big consequences for crime, and encouragement for solving problems with roleplay instead of combat. I'm new to the group, while the others, Paladin and Bard, already knew each other. We all put a huge amount of work into our characters' backstories, and spent a lot of time role-playing complex relationships between our characters. The campaign was actually going great, until the fated session that everything went up in flames. Dungeon Master seemed to be annoyed since the beginning. I was early and noticed that he seemed off, so I asked how he was. He dismissed it and said he was fine, so I didn't push it. Early in the session, we had to solve a puzzle. We were trying, but couldn't figure it out, as the puzzle depended on us remembering something from session 1, from at least 4 or 5 months ago. Meanwhile, the Dungeon Master was growing increasingly frustrated with us, and passively aggressively hinting at a solution. Important to note, the rest of us are having fun joking around, and good-heartedly trying to solve the puzzle, while he seethes in the background. After a while, Dungeon Master exploded. He yelled at us, calling us incompetent idiots and a bunch of other things. I was too shocked to reply, but Paladin tried to calm DM down. He then left the voice call and either banned us or deleted the Discord server that was hosting the campaign. Then he almost immediately deleted the D&D Beyond character sheets and the Roll20 for the campaign. I never spoke to DM again, and I think he blocked me on Discord. Bard messaged me a few days after it happened and said that DM had done that kind of thing before. She asked if I wanted her to tell me whenever DM started a new campaign, clarifying that it might take a while. I politely declined. Yeah, I would have declined as well, since Bard said that this Dungeon Master has done that type of thing before. Which sucks, because it sounded like everybody got along swimmingly for months on end. For the Dungeon Master to cancel and delete the whole campaign due to something so stupid, it just tells me that perhaps something else was going on, and he just took it out on his players, which is never cool. Let's move on. What Not to Do with Novice Players, the Most Useless Wand Ever, by Reddit user WordWizardX. Note: this was about 15 years ago when I was a D&D newbie, so I may be misremembering a few details. Just roll with it. So I didn't discover Dungeons & Dragons until I was already in my 20s. My now wife and I ended up playing 3.5 with a group of friends who were all in a similar boat. Only our Dungeon Master had actually played more than a few sessions previously. He was meticulous about doing everything absolutely by the book. No homebrew, no house rules, and most importantly for this story, all loot was strictly randomly generated. Of course, since the rest of us were new, our builds were all over the place, and not particularly well optimized. We battled our way up to the top of a monster-filled tower, and accumulated a smattering of loot, much of which we couldn't use. The jewel-encrusted bagpipes come to mind, as we had no bard. We also had no way to figure out what the various enchanted items were, so we just threw them in our inventory and resolved to sort it out back in town eventually. So we get to the top of the tower and face off against the big bad. None of us had enough Dungeons & Dragons experience to know what it was out of character, and we all rolled badly on our in-character knowledge checks, so even now, I'm not entirely sure what it was. Something troll-like, I think. We square up, threaten something cliché, and start the fight. And promptly started losing, big time. None of our attacks seem to be doing much, even when they hit, and we have no idea why. Our casters and health potions are depleted in short order, and we can't retreat. Now, with another 15 years of Dungeons & Dragons and some DMing of my own under my belt, I look back and see things I would have done if I were our DM. Dropping hints about the big bad having effing regenerate, for example, and or fudging numbers so I didn't wipe the party out, though our DM didn't do any of that. As a last-ditch effort, we start pulling out the various unidentified weapons that we'd acquired, and trying them out. My wife is all out of spell slots, so she fires with an unknown magic wand, and is told, "You sense there's a hidden door that unlocks somewhere in the floors below you." The party then got wiped. There was no plausible Deus Ex Machina, and at the end of the session, our Dungeon Master admitted that he realized halfway through that he'd actually made a math error in calculating the party's damage reduction against the big bad's hide, but decided it was better to be consistent and kill us all than say anything. One of our other friends stepped up to Dungeon Master a new campaign the following week. Man, that had to suck as a first experience of playing Dungeons & Dragons. Like OP said, the Dungeon Master could have done many things to avoid this, like correcting his math issue for one. And why couldn't the party retreat? That would have been a viable option for survival. Then, not to mention making the loot randomly generated. That's no fun. At least it sounds like this didn't prevent the group from trying it out again, this time with a better DM. Let's move on. Back in the day, I worked at a game store. By Reddit user, Liches Be Crazy. Pretty awesome gig for a college kid needing drinking money, huh? It was right in the middle of the bar district downtown. Most of our normal and respectable customers came in at night, after they got off work. People that showed up before 4 were often strange. We tended to call them the day people. Here are some examples. 1. 400-pound woman playing Illuminati or Legend of the Five Rings card game in the middle of the afternoon. She starts bleeding onto the felt chair through her sweatpants, then dabs it up with some bathroom brown paper towels and sits back down in it to keep playing. 2. A girl comes into the store looking for tarot cards. We sold them there for some reason. Feeling comfortable, she starts telling me about astral projection and how she spends each night traveling the world with Loki. 3. Strange dumb kid comes into the store. I'm telling another customer about the new World of Darkness products and the new metaplot elements. He stands there, easily 18 years old, staring at us while I finish up. I look to him and say, "Can I help you?" To which he replies, "Are you talking about a game or real life?" A week later, I saw him at the metaphysics shop down the street, asking the clerk while holding a 2nd edition monster manual, "Could you tell me which one of these monsters are real?" A regular broke into the lockers with a crowbar and stole everyone's magic cards that they kept at the shop. He shows up the next week, playing the stolen decks, obviously. There was a crap storm over it. And 5. I, personally, was told by 3 different LARP groups that someone played me in their games. I was killed twice, and I turned into a thrall once. Very weird, but I was flattered. Well, some of those customers ranged from weird to just disgusting. Reading the part about the big woman bleeding onto the chair made me gag when reading it. Then there was the astral projecting woman, going on adventures at night with a god of Norse mythology. But with all of those, it inspired another Reddit user to post some of their own strange friendly local game store stories. So let's get into some of those. Inspired by user Liches Be Crazy, Game Store Weirdness. By Reddit user Horny But Tired. Reddit user Liches Be Crazy had a great post about the weirdos they encountered at their game store back when, and it inspired me to share too. Our friendly local game store opened in the 80s, I want to say around 86 or 87, and I was a regular there from the get-go. It changed ownership in the mid to late 90s, more on that in a moment, and I started showing up less and less, but the core crowd never changed, and in our case, it was the core crowd who were the cuckoos. 1. There was a guy who only ever wanted to run GURPS, which he did not know how to run. He insisted, for instance, that a professional baseball player would need a high score in the math and physics skills so he could do the calculations necessary to catch the ball in flight. Skills in GURPS are checked on 3d6. Roll under your skill level and you succeed. So a really good skill rank is, say, 14 or so, and 16 or more is considered expert. This guy was adamant that even an average army medic would obviously need a first aid score of at least 30. Incidentally, buying a skill of that level would have required more points that the average starting character had, in total, and the skill purchase charts didn't go anywhere near that high. No one ever played in this dude's games more than once. 2. There was a school art dropout who always wanted to start a cult. Didn't matter what game he was in, what the setting was, etc. His character would wander away from the party and try to start a cult. And woe betide you if you were running for him and introduced a female NPC who happened to be an art student. He would invariably become creepily fixated on said NPC. Crap made my skin crawl. 3. The usual motley was there, of course. The obligatory guy who always played a ninja. The one guy who insisted he was an expert on literally any subject that happened to be under discussion. There's always that one. And the guy who had done a single 4-year hitch in the army, in the motor pool, and afterwards lectured everyone on proper military tactics, and other such stuff whenever anything even vaguely related came up in game. But the dude who took the cake, I'll call Mouthy. Mouthy didn't have conversations, he delivered monologues. He was convinced that he was hilarious and charismatic, and that everyone loved him, but trying to talk to him was begging to be harangued for the next 2 hours on whatever happened to pop into his head. Mouthy later got into big legal trouble and went to prison for a long time, but that part of the story is just creepy and sad, so I'll skip the details. 4. After the original, very cool owners of the shop sold it in the mid-90s, the new owner became part of the weirdness. He would just sit behind the register playing some cartoon-based MMO, and barely acknowledged customers coming in. He had a regular D&D game he was in with some of the customers, but maintained a stubborn ignorance about literally every other game product, just saying about the other games lines like, "They aren't D&D." When he bought the old place lock, stock, and barrel, he wound up with a lot of older product, including a bunch of stuff for out-of-print games and editions. The old owners had that stuff from their discount rack, though the new guy just slapped it on the shelves at full cover price. Needless to say, it largely just gathered dust and took up shelf space. For a while, the new owner also tried to close up every day at 5 p.m., ignoring the fact that the vast majority of his customers came in after regular business hours. He complained constantly about having to stay open late in order to stay in business. I am ride or die for local game stores, but if we're being honest, they can be really weird places. I hope other people will follow Reddit user LitchesBeCrazy's example and share some friendly game store horror stories. Now, I've never played GURPS, but you would think that if that was something that someone only plays, that they would know how to play. No wonder that dude had so much trouble getting players. And OP was definitely right when they said that there is always someone who knows everything about any topic in the universe. I have definitely run into a few of those in my life. And I know that OP said that it was creepy and sad on why Mouthy went to prison, but I have to admit, that left me a bit curious. Then there was the new owner who didn't seem to realize that most customers would probably be in the shop after 5 on weekdays, as people that spend money on things have jobs. I wonder how long he stayed in business with that attitude. Now, do you have any friendly local game store stories that you would like to see read on the channel? If so, be sure to post them to the D&D Doge subreddit, and who knows, you may just see it pop up in a video. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.